Good afternoon and welcome to the Introduction to AI in Education webinar. My name is Danica Saunders. I'm the event coordinator at SACAP and I will be your host this afternoon. We are excited to have you join us today as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming the world of education. AI is opening new doors for students, educators, and institutions alike. Joining us today, we have Carl Badenhorst. Carl is the Head of Learning Innovation at SACAP with expertise in learning design, curriculum development, digital learning systems, and assessment strategy. His work focuses on designing purposeful learning experiences that meet real needs. With experience across higher education, he brings clarity and precision to complex projects. He collaborates closely with teams to move ideas from concept to execution, always guided by practical outcomes and thoughtful design. And now, without any further ado, I'll hand over to Carl. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction and the welcome. And yeah, I just want to welcome everybody to this really exciting topic and an incredibly important one and a very, very relevant one for, I guess, anybody working in the education sector in the 21st century and grappling with the questions, the challenges, and the opportunities that AI can bring to your teaching and learning. So I do have I've set a few objectives for today's webinar. And I guess they can be seen as some pretty ambitious objectives to cover within the first hour. So if we just move on to the slide on the learning objectives. So I have a couple of hopes just to take you through many of these things today, but not only to set these objectives, but also to give you a sense of why these sorts of things are important within your practice as educators and teachers. But for the most part, usually also with these webinars, there's something to promote at the end as well. But I'll spend a few minutes at the end just talking about some things to look forward to in the future. But really, my hope for the end of this session today is really just to give you a sense of being confident or in a position to not only understand what artificial intelligence is, but also to be able to explain it and describe it to others, particularly its role in education. This is really to build confidence. To bring confidence in how you engage in these conversations about AI with its potential limitations as well as its abilities there. Also to give you the basics in identifying and evaluating tools that really support your role as a teacher, not only administratively, but also teaching tasks. And this just helps with selecting appropriate tools. And I think sometimes people sort of feel a little bit of tool fatigue. There's so many new tools out there. And if you're on social media, you're constantly bombarded with the next best thing in AI. So how do we really select the tools that we need that are appropriate? And then to really understand how AI can enhance rather than replace human teachings. And there's a lot of fear, I guess, in those kind of questions around the anxiety and real fears of AI replacing jobs or replacing people in certain roles. So you may be able to see, I guess, envision and really see where the practical as well, recognize these practical examples. So you can kind of envision a future of education with AI. And then, yeah, just to apply some basic strategies for how you can start to integrate AI into your teaching practice. So you can begin experimenting with these tools because I think it's worth saying right at the start of things, I think probably the most important and probably the most profound thing I can say is that the best thing for you is to go and use the tools, just to use them and to experience them and to kind of see where it benefits you. But if we move on to our next slide, and we're going to look at just an introduction to AI and to talk specific about a concept known or called AI literacy. And I think we're living in a world where we are constantly seeing a need to develop more and more literacies. I mean, we typically think of literacy in terms of reading and writing, but there's also concepts of numerical literacy, digital literacy, financial literacy, and AI literacy is now becoming quite a critical competency and skill set. And I think UNESCO has also highlighted and developed particular frameworks, particularly for education of competencies that students need to develop in to be able to work and flourish in an AI world. And the same for teachers, educators, a level of AI competencies that they need to develop. So AI literacy is really not it's not a static definition. I think it's also a constantly evolving definition. But I think the most important thing to remember or take as well with AI literacy is that it's also just being, it's also the focus on just being human in an AI world and really holding on to what actually makes us human and sort of separates us from technologies like AI, and to keep going back to the skills that we as humans bring to the conversation that AI can't. Things like curiosity, empathy, judgment, and responsibility. Because AI can process huge amounts of data. It can suggest answers incredibly quickly. But it's the people who are using the tools, we are the ones that get to ask and guide the much deeper questions. We understand our nuance, we understand the context that we work in. And yeah, just as humans, when something feels off, we know it. We can pause, we can reflect. Remember, humans have been part of a long story. You know, we've gone from stone tools now through to AI. And if you look throughout the ages, the introduction of many, many tools has changed and impacted the way that we work, think, communicate. But ultimately, at the core, one thing stays the same, and that is that as people, we shape the tools, not the other way around. So AI literacy is about our ability to really engage critically with these systems, creatively with them, using them responsibly, understanding how they work, understanding their limitations, understanding their capabilities. So this literacy, AI literacy, is not simply the technical skills of being able to use certain AI tools like ChatGPT, but it's also about the ethics and about the social impact and the ethical implications of these tools. And knowing what AI can do, knowing what it can't do, knowing where it falls short. And a guiding question is that you should ask yourself constantly when dealing with AI or a new AI tool is, does this tool help me? And does this tool help people? Does it make things better? Does it improve things? And that's also a constant tool that you can use to evaluate it. So if we move on, let's look at just a sort of brief definition, or just a touch on sort of a need again for particularly educators in an AI world. And this is just to give you the confidence again, the confidence and the skills. AI literacy is about confidence, it's about skills and competencies, about making these informed decisions in your teaching and learning, being able to understand the ethics of these tools, being able to spot biases in the information, errors, incorrect information, as well as just to help you avoid any misuse or over-reliance, so that can also be sort of transferred through to your students, and the responsibility of educators to also impart a sense of AI literacy with our students, and it becoming quite a key and core part of our curriculum. So let's move on and let's just look at a brief definition of you know, what is AI? And I think most people intuitively understand what AI is, and it's important to understand how it works and what it is as part of your literacy framework. And AI is also in no means something that is actually new. I think that it has really, you know, accelerated in the last couple of years with the release of ChatGPT. But, you know, research into artificial intelligence as a field as a scientific field and discipline has been around since the 1950s. And even when you look as far back into Greek mythology, there's stories of humans using and building technology to sort of augment the limitations that humans have. So it's by no means this new thing. It's been around, evolving for a while, but it's really now accelerated with the release or with the advent of generative AI. And I think AI is also saturated every time you use your phone. There's AI is a play, AI is busy sorting your inbox into spam folders, your Spotify playlists, your Netflix recommendations, Google Maps. All of this is AI, is using huge amounts of data. So generally speaking, there are different types and subsets of AI, but generally speaking, it refers to these systems that are able to perform tasks that we do sometimes, we usually associate with human intelligence. Things like language, recognizing patterns, making decisions, calculations, analyzing data. So tools like ChatGPT are trained, they use a concept known as machine learning, which is trained on huge amounts of data sets that the developers are using in this. So massive amounts of data sets. And this training really just allows it to generate ideas, summarize text, answer questions. Now, it's not doing this because it understands the data. It's not doing this because it understands the meaning of that data. It's doing this because it's able to recognize patterns in language, and then being able to make predictions based on those patterns. So AI does not think, it calculates. It has no level of consciousness, it cannot reflect, and it doesn't care. It has no feelings. It is purely computational in that sense. And I think any sense of personality that might come through in an AI is just how it's been trained to represent that. And that's something called prompt engineering, which we'll cover on a little bit later. So yeah, it's important. It doesn't work. It doesn't think, it calculates. It has no conscious. But nonetheless, it's changing how we work. It's also changing how we think. It's changing also what we value, how we see ourselves. And it raises that question, like, what happens now when intelligence is not something that simply belongs to humans alone? So AI versus human thinking is a new relationship. So human thinking is creative, it's contextual. We understand our context, we understand our nuance. Human thinking is relational. We can connect facts, to feelings, we can apply values, and we can imagine. And we can imagine a future. Whereas think of AI as your high-powered calculator, human thinking is more like a compass. So a calculator can give you fast and accurate answers, but only when you know what to input. Compass will help you choose direction, and it guides you on the journey. And that is your role as the human, the educator, when using AI. You are the one that has the plan. You are the one that has the purpose, the objectives. You know the direction, and you guide things in this way. There's a very interesting book that I would suggest everyone read. It's called Co-Intelligence by Professor Ethan Mollick. He's a professor at Wharton Business School, professor of entrepreneurship and innovation. And in his book, Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI, he says that the future isn't about humans versus AI, one or the other. It's about humans and AI working together, where we are blending our unique strengths in this. We are forming a level of cooperation, co-intelligence, which is also why a lot of AI tools are often referred to as co-pilots, because AI is incredibly fast, it's scalable, as I said, it can do certain tasks at scale very, very quickly, whereas we as the humans we are moral, we have imagination, and we are able to adapt to our environment and our surroundings. So together we can collaborate very deliberately. And in education, this is an area where educators and teachers can start to shift their focus on developing a particular set of skills. It's learning and seeing what AI can do or accomplish in the role from administration through to teaching. And I think the future for educators, for teachers, is to really develop and focus on things like empathy, ethics, collaboration, and creativity, and asking the big questions around AI and how we bring it into our classrooms, because it's here and it's here to stay, and we need to make sure that it's going to serve our needs, the needs of our students in their particular context, which in South Africa is a very diverse context, with a lot of variation and nuance, and to constantly going with those things of how do we make sure it's serving us in that. All right, so let's move on and let's look at some key ideas around AI as a teaching assistant and how it's being used in the classroom, because many educators globally are using AI in their teaching and in their research in some form or another. Some are using it incredibly well, others not necessarily. So the use cases are quite vast, I guess, but I guess I've clumped it up into some areas where broad areas or broad themes where you can look at using AI. For example, planning lessons. It can be a very valuable tool in helping you to systematically plan lessons, which could be reusable in the future. It allows you to be able to really apply certain learning theories and learning sciences principles to your lesson plans and to sort of structure them. We're starting to see a lot of application in grading and marking assignments in some areas, that it's starting to leverage and support that process in a number of ways. It can help to simplify or translate quite complex language or text. So often academic language in higher education, often academic language is quite complex. And especially for second, third language speakers, that can be a barrier. So AI can even assist in just in helping with fairly complex language. You've got sophisticated systems that can look at learning gaps and areas and skills development, and it can also sort of support students sort of with certain disabilities as well. You've got text to speech, for example. So there's a multitude of applications, and I think the area where I've been focusing a lot of my attention personally has been working with educators in the lesson planning space, and just sort of leveraging at different ways in which it can support really good structured lessons, and to apply certain learning principles in terms of scaffolding, writing case studies, for example, as well, which can be quite time consuming, if you don't have certain case studies to draw from and you need to write very specific contextual case studies for active learning. It can do that for you. It can create case studies that become increasingly more complex as well, as you work through a class or a module. But ultimately, this does require an ability to be able to effectively use the tools through prompting. I just want to circle back to the co-intelligence part quickly, and just to kind of touch on a number of matters there of this relationship, and understanding the relationship that you have with an AI tool. Because when you understand your role, when you understand the role of the AI tool, the co-intelligence framework really helps you to work better. It also helps you to work faster. It also keeps you in control of AI tools, because ethics and bias is a very, very important thing to consider when you are using AI. And especially that we're living in a world of misinformation, and often the training data that's used for these systems itself contains many biases and misinformation. And also this keeps you adaptable. It keeps you ready. It keeps you able to change with the landscape and to evolve with AI, to evolve with in education. So it is a collaborator. It's not just a tool. And I think the language should be quite important as well, as we're referring to it as well. Yes, it's a tool, but that tool serves that specific purpose of collaboration and really supporting you. Understand and look at your own situation, your own context, and where are the areas that you need help? Where are the areas that you need optimization? Where can that collaboration really, really benefit you at the end of the day, to really free you up to focus on the elements that are uniquely human in an educational context. Okay, so if we can move on to then the 4 principles, is that always invited to the table. So I guess it's what I said right at the beginning is probably the most important thing you could do or should be doing, is just trying the tools. If you haven't tried them before, it's to try them. I think there is always a level of anxiety involved, but start small, learn about what works, what doesn't work, and what helps. Always be the human in the loop. So you are there to guide, always guide. You are there to edit, and the final call and the final decision does rest with you. You have the decision or the ability to decide whether or not you use a particular output or not, and then give AI a role. Treat it like a person. And I'll touch on this in a moment. When you look at prompt engineering, we kind of give it a little bit of a persona to really guide its thinking, or guide its in a particular direction. And yes, assume this is the worst AI you will ever use. We're only going to see rapid advancements and improvements almost on a weekly basis. I think that is how incredibly quickly things are moving. We're not in a stage of saying over the coming years. I think it's just over the coming weeks, over the coming months, we're going to see so much change. All right, so let's move on. So you can use your AI to, again, cover things like planning. You can use it for marking as well. We won't get into too much details around the marking today, because there's a lot of ethical considerations when you are looking at marking as well, or using it to support a grading process, depending on the assignment. You can use it to create feedback or write feedback as well, so that you have feedback that can be really meaningful and actionable for students as well. I think that just simply using AI to edit your feedback, not necessarily to write the feedback for you, but to edit your feedback, to ensure that it's really supporting the learners, and that it's also consistent across different assessments that you mark as well. Administrative tasks, very, very much administrative tasks that it can help you with. Even again, editing emails, helping you draft class announcements, plenty over there. And it's, aim for the quick wins. Like, look at the small things, I guess, that it can help you with as well. So something that you can benefit from immediately. So developing an entire grading or marking system is quite a complex task, versus using AI to just edit and format your emails. So, you know, you can just use that to make sure that your emails come across quite clearly as well. So start small. That's that first principle in co-intelligence. It's like start small, find the quick wins. Where is it really going to benefit you in the short term? All right, so let's move on. So I think this is I guess the part everybody should be the most excited about, because prompt engineering, or how we actually communicate with AI, is the valuable skill, and how we can really get it, or get the particular outputs that we're looking from it. So this is, you know, something known as prompt engineering, and there are different types of prompts, and in each type of prompt, you know, you will use it in different cases. And I think informal prompting is a style or a type of prompting that I think most people are familiar with. You know, it's just asking ChatGPT, for example, to explain something or to summarize something like that. Then you get sort of instructional prompts, or otherwise known as system prompts. And these are very structured prompts that are trying to accomplish a really quite a specific task or a specific set of objectives. And that's what we will focus on today mainly when talking about prompt engineering. And then you still got exploratory prompts, and these are, you know, prompts that people use for just sort of brainstorming ideas, or just sort of developing ideas. So it's a very sort of fluid and dynamic, a little bit messy sort of thing. So brainstorm ideas for X, Y, and Z. But the instructional prompts are the ones where we really need to focus on quite specifically in order to make them effective. And the most important thing with these instructional prompts is to start with the end in mind. And to think of what is ultimately the objective. You've got to imagine what it is that you want the AI to do, what it is that you want to produce, and then you work backwards sort of to create that prompt, so that when you start to use it, you're able to test and evaluate that output to be able to determine whether or not it's sufficient quality for you. So if we move on to the next slide, I want to introduce you to something known as the CITI framework, which is a very useful, very practical framework that helps you to create these very structured instructional prompts. And there are a number of different frameworks out there that people use for prompt engineering, but by and large, the principles really do remain the same. And the CITI framework it's a framework that I use, and it's a framework that was developed by someone by the name of Jean-Luc Mauro, who's the founder of AI Academy, which is does sort of training and skills development in AI. It's a company based in Denmark. He was also a lecturer at Harvard for a while, and has been working in the AI field for over a decade. And he sort of conceptualized this framework, and I find it to be one of the more useful and practical ones. So when you're sort of thinking about what it is that you're wanting to, you know, your output to be, let's say, for example, you want to write a class announcement, or you want to create a lesson plan. As you start working backwards, you think about the context. So who is the AI? This is what when I said earlier, sort of treat it like a person or give it a particular role. So in this sense, it's to really guide it into a specific field of knowledge or thinking. So say, for example, you are a social work lecturer, or you are a curriculum specialist. It just creates a parameter for it to know that is its context that it's working in, and what the data that it's working with and drawing from. And you can get quite, you know, you can sort of give it sort of any persona or kind of role as it is. So it's really good to to incorporate that. And you can even get sort of quite detailed. So I see in the example that I've got on the screen as well, social work lecturer for third-year students. So that also gives it additional context in terms of the typical profile of third-year university students. Then comes the instructions. And the thing about AI is you need to be very direct with it. You need to give it very clear instructions. And I think this is something as educators that you are used to, instructing students, giving them instructions or moving, or do this, do that. So the instructions are really important because this is what you need it to do. And you need to be very specific and as detailed as possible, avoid any sort of ambiguity in that. So in the example, it's creating an activity exploring ethical dilemmas in child protection. You could even take that instruction even further, and you could even say, in South Africa or in a particular city, and kind of drill it down. So instruct it what you want it to do. Then a third layer is detail, which is also quite helpful. So this is just any further detail you want to bring into the prompt or into the output. So you can specify word length, you can specify tone, style of language, academic tone, conversational tone, anything else that's just sort of going to round off that. And then sort of the input is the actual data that you need to give to the AI. So then you've got to provide any content or background that's needed. So that is a very helpful. So if you have that structure that you work with and constantly thinking through it, you give it the context, give the instructions, any further detail to sort of round it off and make it more relevant. And then the input is what the data you need to give to the AI. And you then work with this. You've got to constantly test and iterate your prompts until it's, giving you what it is that you need it to give you, that it's meeting its objectives. And once you get these things right, you start to build up a prompt library of prompts that you can use over and over again. And oftentimes it's just the inputs as that variable that changes in terms of the information that you can give it. So if you can move on to the next one. Is that I also often like to think of combining prompt engineering with design thinking. And for those that are not familiar with design thinking, it's really a very iterative process to problem solving. And it really focuses on understanding the needs of people and then kind of working on solutions to that and testing the solution. So it's a very useful sort of framework as well in prompts. As I said, you are looking at understanding what is the need, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, what is the objective, what do you need the AI to do, and then you can move backwards. Then you kind of go through that process of building it, testing it, iterating it, which is really important, because once you've got it working the way and you've got it doing what you need it to do, it becomes part of your prompt library that you can just then use and reuse and share with your peers and with your colleagues as well. So I think it's just the really key takeaway point over here is just the necessity to consistently refine, to test and to refine and to iterate until it's giving you what you hope for. So that's design thinking. If we can move on. So linking back to the context piece and really just sort of illustrating sort of the importance of that. And I think a lot of people approach writing prompts without necessarily providing, the specific context. And I guess, and as I said, there are times when it's not necessarily when you are using more informational or exploratory type of prompting. But within this context, within this structured prompt, that context can really change the the output quite strongly. So no context can likely give you something that's pretty vague or maybe generic or might even be irrelevant. But the second you give it that role or that context, it starts to narrow down its focus. So even just the difference between, say, you're a psychology lecturer, because it knows it needs to look at sort of academic and structured content, or it needs to produce a very academic and structured result. Or if you're a diversity educator, then it knows it needs to look at or give or provide inclusive real-world applications. Instructional designer, it knows it needs to provide something that's suitable for an instructional design context, multimedia, certain formats that are there. So, you know, as the lesson here is that when you change the context, you fundamentally do change the result of that output. So just understanding that context. So if you're thinking of AI as your assistant, it's really that context becomes you. You need to sort of say, what is your context? You're an educator teaching X, Y, Z to these types of students. That really becomes your context to help it really guide that output as much as possible for you. All right, so if we can move on. Yeah, I think for me, as I said earlier as well, is that there's a huge amount of tools out there as well that can be quite overwhelming. And I guess my final tip here as well is just to not get too caught up in the hype of all of the different tools that are out there. And I think for me this is more sort of coming from my sense as educators. I think using one of these or a combination of these is really where you're going to get a lot of your maximum benefit. So ChatGPT is probably the most common of these generative AI bots. Others that you may have heard of are Claude, Gemini, Google's AI, which is also now embedded within all of Google's products, Microsoft Copilot. So not necessarily ChatGPT, but something along those lines. If you do a lot of writing or involved in a lot of writing, Grammarly can also be very effective around structure, style, and assisting structure, style, and grammar and spelling. And then Canva is a graphic design tool, which is becoming incredibly popular in the education space, which also has AI features and AI abilities to be able to generate graphics for lessons or for teaching materials. So those, you know, if you really find the useful tools and use them well, you can get a lot of benefit and maximum benefit from these. Don't get too caught up in all sorts of different tools and that sort of thing. You can achieve a tremendous amount with these. Even within ChatGPT now, it's got very, very capable image generation, with more and more case studies I'm seeing coming out of using it to create images for educational context, infographics, concept maps, mind maps, and so forth. Okay, so if we move on. And I think this is just to sort of just to find a recap or just to summarize the prompt engineering piece. Yeah, prompt engineering is not a skill that you're just going to sort of master overnight. It's something that you've got to do. You've got to try it. You've got to fail. You've got to try again, and just keep working with it. But the basics of it really come down to being very specific about what you want. You got to know what you want. The AI has no idea what you want. Don't leave it guessing. Never leave it guessing. Be very specific about what you want. Include as much context as possible. You can even ask it to provide step-by-step thinking or a structured output according to headings, subheadings, bullet points. And yeah, it is such an important skill because it helps to maximize your use of AI. It helps you to get better responses. It helps you to avoid anything that's vague or misleading, and it's ultimately going to save you time. and always, always, always check and confirm those outputs, because there are biases that creep through, but also the more structured and specific your prompt is, you mitigate against a lot of potential biases that might come out in the outputs. Okay, so if we move on, so I've mentioned bias already, of just things to be very mindful of. Obviously, over-reliance can also become an issue, that we just become too reliant on certain things. So that's, again, keeping sort of sense of your role as human with the tool. And then obviously privacy concerns with these tools, and being mindful of what you upload to these systems, that you first of all have the rights to do that, the permission, not including any sensitive or identifiable information in that. So if you do, if you do have a ChatGPT account and you are on the premium paid version, if you go into your settings, you can enable a feature to sort of block it from sharing any of your information into the training data. So that's sort of a safeguard around that. So if you accidentally include credit card information or other personal information, it doesn't get shared into the training data. So be very, very mindful of data privacy and privacy concerns. These are all very, very important. And also in the tools that you use, make sure that you understand the terms and conditions and the data privacy. And then, yes, as I said, bias. And that's often because as humans, the data and information that's been used contains biases that we've brought in there. And also these systems have largely been developed within Western contexts, European and North American contexts, and can sometimes be quite underrepresentative of other cultures and areas. So consistently check for that. And that it is in our context, in the South African context. That's why in your prompting, to be as specific as possible in describing or providing your particular context. Okay, so if we can move on. These are two case studies that I just put here, just to again give you a sense or a visual example of different ways that you can use AI. So in the first one, it's around writing lesson objectives. So in this case study, a lecturer is using it to design measurable AI relevant learning objectives for an information literacy class. So using a prompt of writing learning objectives. So it's really, it's quite good and very helpful at writing very structured, measurable learning objectives. So that's one case study. In the second one as well, looked at creating sort of problem solving or driving questions to really get students to think quite deeply about a particular topic. So driving questions are questions that can't be answered in sort of a yes or no format. They do require a level of depth and curiosity. So and these drive motivation as well among students. So you can use AI to really assist you in writing good measurable learning outcomes or objectives, discussion questions for classroom environments, and so forth. So I encourage you to sort of look around on the web, many different places. If you search for ideas, and you'll start to see a lot of case studies like this of where and how people are using AI. All right, so if we can move on. We'll just cover again on terms of the ethics and the bias and the data privacy. It's just something to consistently drive through, to sort of not be complacent. Don't become complacent around issues of bias that could come through in the outputs or the data privacy, and also being transparent and building a level of transparency and trust with your students, so that we don't start to create or give a sense of surveillance Students are using AI because the world is using AI. Educators are using it. So yeah, be transparent with your students about how you use AI, what you use it for, and when you use it for. And that sort of sets the example and encourages them to be transparent with you as well in terms of how they're using it, and have open and honest conversations with your students, so it's not sort of a case of, as I said, it's surveillance or checking up on things. So transparency, I think, is really important. We're using these tools, and it's important to sort of set that tone with our students around what is good use, what is responsible use of AI. And these are important conversations in every classroom. And this is, as I mentioned, model the responsible use with your students. I think these discussions around AI literacy and responsible use are fundamental in any teaching and in environment. So that we are also have that responsibility of our students to help them to also ethically and mindfully and thoughtfully use AI, because they are going to enter a workplace in which these tools are quite extensively used. All right, so if you move on. Yeah, so just sort of in closing off, I think some of the strategies for you, depending on how familiar you are or how experienced you are with AI tools. As I said, start with something small. Just start with one tool, find a simple use case, even if it's editing and formatting an email, and work with that. Start with something, test it, create a little note or a folder of like what is working, what worked. Talk to people, if something is really is benefiting you, share your wins with people. Encourage peer learning, talk to your peers about it, work together on it, think through the questions and the use cases together. And yeah, be curious, make that space to explore, make the space to try. You're going to fail and you're going to learn as you hone the skill. And really, when you use AI, keep it in the classroom, keep it focused on the learning goals. How is this supporting the learning goals? How is this supporting the learning process? And that it's not just tech for tech's sake. Yeah, and look at ways and exploring ways in which AI can actually support inclusion and not necessarily widen existing gaps in South Africa. All right, so we move on. Yeah, so today we've covered these things in terms of AI as a useful and support tool for you. I hope that you are able to see where and how it could benefit you as an educator. You don't need to be a tech expert. It's like it's using natural language when you're talking to AI. And that there's very practical and small and safe ways and simple ways to get started. And that responsible use and modeling that responsible for use is especially important. And I think it's at this stage to say that there is going to be opportunity later in the year as well, is that we are going to be launching a course through SACAP Global that looks at AI, that covers AI literacy, specifically the ethical and innovative integration of AI into teaching and learning. So that would be in the second half of the year. So if you can just keep your eyes on that, and keep an eye out for that, and that would be a really great opportunity to also really get into the space and dig a little bit deeper. So my challenge to you is, if you are still very new to this, I challenge you to try an AI tool this week, or if you have been using one, maybe try something different. Talk about it to your colleagues, your family, your friends, and then, yeah, bookmark this recording, for any further reference or guidance, and keep your eyes open for our upcoming course on the ethical integration of AI in education. Right, so thank you very, very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Carl. To our attendees, thank you so much. Please do follow us on our various social media channels to stay up to date on upcoming events, program launches, and updates, and to see the recording to this webinar. Once again, I'd like to thank our attendees and Carl for this wonderful webinar, and we hope you have a wonderful day further. Thank you so much.